Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Calgary, Alberta. It's Friday, July the 23rd. I'm happy to be here. This is one child abuse survivor to another. I'm just having some coffee, waking up, and just getting my information ready here. I wanted to continue talking about the Adult Surviving Child Abuse website. You can find it www.asca.org.au. And believe it's affiliated with the with the ASCA here in North America, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse. It's a Morris Center program, and just by looking around at the material, and it's a great website. I hope everybody will check it out. There's lots of good information on there, different stuff than I've seen elsewhere so far. You know, I look around at all kinds of websites for survivors of child abuse, so I'm always looking for information. That's why I'm doing these shows. I'm not a professional, or I don't have any counseling certificates, therapist certificates. I'm just a private citizen who pays to do my own shows, and really just to bring information out, to be one more voice, to speak out against child abuse, and to say, you're not alone if you are surviving and going through your healing journey as a survivor of child abuse. You're not alone, and sadly, there's so many of us out there, right? Excuse me. So that's why I'm doing these shows. So you have to listen at your own discretion. A lot of the material can be triggering to survivors. Especially depending on how far along you've come in your healing journey. So I always tell people that, when I start my shows, just to listen at your own discretion, please. And the topics of abuse are very sensitive. And I cover all topics regarding abuse, and so we have to know what's good for us to listen to and what will trigger us, right? So you won't be hurting my feelings if you feel uncomfortable and you need to turn off the show. That's fine, or just to go somewhere else, right? That's no problem. If you're a young person under the age of 18, I ask that you have permission to listen to my shows. There's a lot of adult content on here that I think is maybe a little bit scary to children, to young people who have not heard about abuse or heard about any of this stuff. And quite often nobody would have heard about this stuff because there isn't all that many voices talking about it in the mainstream. There's a lot of people, elsewhere behind the scenes talking about it, and like on Blog Talk Radio and different places like that, different mediums, but websites and whatnot. But out in the mainstream society, no one really is talking about child abuse. It's just swept under the carpet, hidden away. Nobody wants to deal with it. Nobody wants to talk about it. And we know that 1 in 3 girls, 1 in 6 boys will be abused under the age of 18, whether it's sexual abuse, physical, psychological, emotional, verbal, right? So that's the whole issue. Child abuse is happening, and whether people want to talk about it or not, it doesn't matter. It is happening, and that's why I'm talking about it, just to be one more voice, right? So if you're a young person, make sure you have someone listen to the show with you, and that way they can help you to decide, whether or not you should be listening. And then if you have questions, they can help you find some answers, and hopefully, and then it won't be so confusing, and you won't be wondering what I'm talking about. So this is a great website. We're going to finish up talking about cognitive pathways. We did start that yesterday morning. Excuse me. And this is very interesting information for me because I look at it and I can see how it relates to my life and as a survivor, and how as an adult, some of the things that I've done through my adult years, I can see what they're talking about here. It's very much related to the abuse that I suffered as a child. It's quite interesting to see them identify it and, just sort of give us some more information on it. So that's where we're going to continue on today. And this section, actually, that I'm reading from on this website, from the asca.org.au, is called Pathways through which adult health can be compromised. And so that's where we've been reading from pretty much all week. And we went through the emotional pathways, primary attachment. They talked about attachment theories and secure attachments, ambivalent attachments, avoidant attachments, and disorganized attachments and whatnot. And we looked at behavioral pathways. Now we're looking at cognitive pathways. And yesterday we left off here, so I just want to sort of pick up where we left off. And they were saying right here, I'm just reading from the page, cognitive pathways include the beliefs and attitudes one adopts that shape daily life. And some of the long-term impacts of child abuse may be grounded in the rejection and betrayal the child experienced and their impact on cognitive patterns. As children, survivors of child abuse have often been betrayed, manipulated and silenced by the adult or adults they should have been able to trust. And most cognitive theories of development acknowledge that we organize the world according to emotion. In particular, we tend to have a natural bias towards the positive, especially when evaluating ourselves. That's from Ayub, 2006. Children who experience severe or ongoing maltreatment will tend to develop a negative bias, especially towards themselves. And there is a tendency for children experiencing child abuse to attribute blame to themselves and internalize abusive behaviors. And these tendencies become cognitive patterns that they can continue long into adulthood and contribute to delays in the development of self-esteem and a healthy identity. And so we were talking about this, cognitive pathways are clearly intertwined with biological pathways. Children who are abused go immediately from fearful stimulus to fight or flight responses without learning from the experience because they can't grasp what is going on. And adult survivors' responses to hostility or silence can often be misinterpreted as responses to current events rather than the conditioned reaction to reminders of the past they embody. And adult survivors tend to experience current stressors with an emotional intensity that belongs to the past and that has little value in the present. And that's from Streak, Fisher, and Vanderkolk, 2000. I think that's quite interesting, where they said that what adult survivors' responses to, in the here and now are quite often just a conditioned reaction from the past. It's something that we as adult survivors took on as a learned behavior, and because we had to, we were forced to, and then that behavior is what people see nowadays, and they see that, but actually what that behavior is linked to is from the past. It's not based on what our current, because we haven't learned. I guess it's quite interesting, we haven't learned how to change the way that we handle things, how we cope and how we react to things. And so it's a conditioned reaction to the reminders of the past that that causes us to behave a certain way. So I think that's interesting because I know in my own personal life, especially in work situations at work and whatnot, I just tend to do that all the time, and I'm getting better as the years go on. But I always tend to take on the stress of anybody who's around me. I sort of mirror what's happening around me. So if my boss is stressed out, even if they're not stressed out at me, I take on the stress. Because growing up abused in an abusive environment, I was always taking on my mom's stress because I was always trying to I was really just trying to, sort of keep myself safe. So I would just always be aware of how her mood was and try to be on her side all the time. So if she was upset, I would try to take her side on everything, and that way I could avoid abuse of any kind, right? Whether it's physical or verbal or whatever. And so I do that as an adult as well, and I tend to take on a lot of stress that doesn't even belong to me, just because it's a conditioned response. And so I'm learning how now to sort of be aware of that, and also look for this situation, and say, okay, is this something that I really need to be concerned with? Does it concern me, or is it just that my boss is having a bad day? And of course, then I can be compassionate and I like my boss, and I've liked all my bosses actually, but I've had some problems, because any authority figure in my life, I tend to do that with, right? And I think it's a conditioned response. Even though I know my boss is not going to beat me up and trash me and abuse me verbally or physically or whatever, that's not it. It's just that the behavior it's a conditioned response. You know what I mean? So I know my boss is not going to beat me up. It's not like I'm walking around the office thinking, oh my God, my boss is going to beat me up. It's not like that. What it is just that I've been conditioned over the years to pay a little bit too much attention to what's going on around me and the moods that people are in, and then I take that on, and of course it causes me extra stress when it doesn't need to. It's not my stress and it's not my problem. I'm just there to do a job, you know what I mean? And if my boss had a problem with me, then they would probably come and tell me about it. You know what I mean? Then I would know it was my problem. Otherwise, I don't need to be concerned with it. So that's the thing. It's a little bit hard as an adult, survivor to learn to undo these behaviors that we were forced to take on as children just to survive. And even in personal relationships, I had to learn how to handle that with boyfriends and whatnot. I never had that many boyfriends, but I was in a couple of serious relationships that I just had no clue how to function in, because I had never seen any good examples. I had only seen a couple of good examples of a real family where I actually got to see the interaction between the parents and between the children that was normal, So, and the rest of my youth, I spent watching my parents fight, and so, and hate each other and call each other names and be, physically abusive and verbally abusive towards each other, always trying to tear each other down psychologically and emotionally, right? So they were just destroying each other all the time. So that's what I learned how to do in a relationship. And I carried it on right into my 30s with my sweetheart, who's currently still with me. And he was just freaked out by my behavior, but I was very much feeling threatened. Just even being in the relationship with him, I considered it a threat. I didn't really trust him, and I didn't know how to handle anything regarding, my feelings or how to even be in a relationship. You know what I mean? So everything was just off the first year. We ended up breaking up, and for a couple of reasons. I didn't trust him, and not only that, but I lost my baby, and I was very upset. Lost my baby half term, and I was just devastated. And so I was stressed out, and I didn't trust him. You know what I mean? So I broke off the relationship and went and spent a year just trying to get myself together. Then my mom passed away shortly after that, within about 3 months. And so I had to do a whole lot of work just to survive that year, because I had a lot of anger and whatnot towards my mom. So my relationships with people really were pretty not that good, not that healthy. And it's because I really didn't know how to handle myself in a relationship that I could, that I could handle myself better, and there was better ways to deal with things than what I was doing, which was just what I had learned to do as a child. So that's the thing. A lot of these behaviors that we do and we take on as adults, we're just doing because it's a conditioned response. It's not that we might even notice that we're doing it. It's just something that we've been doing for so long, and we just never really learned how to correct it, or that we even would need to correct it. My sweetheart, when we did get back together, I told him exactly what had happened, and I said, look, you need to know some things about me, and I need to know some things about you. You know what I mean? Because I want to have a good life, and the two of us cannot spend our lives doing what my parents did, which was destroy each other. So it's either we're going to love each other and be here for each other, or we're not going to be in this at all. So we did get back together after a year, and I told him what had happened, really spelled it out for him, and then he said that he didn't like some of my behavior because it was abusive, and he just wasn't used to that, and he's just like, I don't know, I said, well, we'll have to try. We'll really have to try to treat each other properly. And I'll have to try to learn how to trust, but then you have to also show me a lot of respect, and you have to be watching out, because the minute you hurt me, I'll be back into that whole thing where, if you intentionally hurt me, and then I'll leave you again. You know what I mean? I said I cannot be abused anymore, so it's up to you. There's the door. You're more than welcome to leave. But if you think you're going to treat me badly in any way, shape, or form, whether it's verbal abuse, physical abuse, pushing me around, or psychologically trying to get me to do things for your own gain or whatever, I spelled it out for him, and I showed him the door, and I said, there's the door. If you're going to treat me properly, and you're going to treat me like a partner should, with care, concern, and respect and love, then we can do this thing, And so it was a serious issue, and it was hard for me to allow him to even stay in my life. It was hard to, even though we weren't married and I could leave any time, it was setting myself up again to be hurt, And so, but at some point we do have to learn how to build these trust skills, these skills that would allow us to live life, right, without just running all the time or giving up on things ahead of time just in case we get hurt, which was my big thing, I mean, I was really prepared all the time to leave any situation where I was feeling that I was going to be abused or mistreated in any way. So, because I was just protecting myself. I was tired of it. I got very, very tired of being abused. By the age of 21, I said never again. And my friends, family, I don't care who it is, So, but by doing that, I closed myself off and would not allow myself to be involved in any relationships. I spent a lot of time by myself, and so I never learned how to be in a relationship. So really the best thing I could do was to understand what I needed from a relationship to get my my thoughts clear, and understand that I did not want to be abused, but I also did not want to be an abuser, and really take a good look at what I needed, what I would allow someone to do in my life, and how someone would be how someone would treat me. I seriously sat down and I put behavioral, like I got my boundaries set, because I had never had any when children are abused, there's no boundaries. Parents or caregivers or whoever's doing the abusing cross those boundaries, and those boundaries just don't exist, right? But as adults, we can set those boundaries, and we can say, hey, I will not tolerate this. I will not tolerate abuse. I will not let anyone abuse me physically, verbally, psychologically ever again. And we can do that. And then when someone does accidentally do something that hurts us, we can tell them, I did not appreciate that. You hurt my feelings, or you hurt me, and what are you going to do to make restitution? And if they continue to abuse you, you need to get out, because there's no sense in becoming re-victimized. Like if you spent your life being abused as a child and then you move on to an abusive marriage, which is what my mother did, your whole life will be just misery. My mom painted that picture for me, because she did that. She was abused as a child, horribly, and then went on to this marriage that was just the worst. You know what I mean? Well, it wasn't the worst. There's other marriages out there that are just horrific, but the thing is that it was a bad marriage. It was horrible. And, she was not loved. He did not love her. You know what I mean? He treated her bad. And my dad, right? And then he swears up and down he loves her so much. And that's why the family just looks at him like, the remaining members of the family are just looking at him like, you're crazy. You're out of your flippin' head. How could you even say that? You did not love that woman. You know what I mean? But somewhere deep down inside of him, his sick self, he probably does love her. He did love her. But he could not treat her properly. You know what I mean? He could not treat her right. It was not in his makeup. Like, he was not able to do it. So he never once told her he loved her. He never once bought her flowers. He never once treated her with respect or dignity. He just called her names and whore, and told her that all of her kids were not his, and that she was a whore. And I heard this almost every day. And on Sundays it would be the worst, because he'd come home and he'd tell her that she was going to hell with all of her children and offspring who were evil. And he used to just drive her crazy, push her around, especially when they were young, slapping her around and treating her really badly, and withholding love, money, everything, until she finally got the strength up to take over the checkbook, because the bills weren't being paid and the kids were going hungry, right? And so, but she continued to put up with his abuse and behavior and rape and everything else. He was forcing himself on her, and she was abused as a child, and she went right into that stupid marriage, and then abused us, because she was so miserable. She couldn't stand our family, and she was very, very miserable for so many years. And it was only later, when she got, when we were like, late teens, where things started to pick up a little bit, and she started to to sort of relax and stuff, and even my dad did, but they were getting old. They were getting close to 60. So, at some point they had to settle down. They could only do so much fighting. They continued to fight until the day she died, but the thing is they had 1 year sort of before she died where they kind of sort of made up, but it didn't make up for all that garbage that he had put her through, because my mom was a faithful woman. She never, I'm sure of it, I knew she would never ever sleep around, and my dad had been accusing her of that for their whole marriage, which was, they were married when she was 20, so 48 years my dad called her a whore, and never once said he loved her, never bought her anything, made her sleep on, she did not have her own bedroom. He wouldn't take the couch, but actually I think my mom was trying to protect the kids, so she took the couch, But they had a miserable existence. And that's why as adult survivors, we cannot do that. We must put our foot down. You know what I mean? If you're in a relationship with somebody who is not treating you right, and you were abused as a child, you are just going right back into the whole, situation that you never deserved in the first place. And then to be taking that as an adult, whether it's a partner or girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, husband, wife, you do not deserve that. So make sure that you get some help. Because I know we used to tell my mom to leave my dad, years and years ago. And all the kids, my brothers, they were a lot, there was a big, span of time in between me and my older brothers. But I remember hearing the conversations, my brothers would tell my mom that she should leave my dad, and get some help. And even if she didn't want to take the kids, just to leave my dad and get out, And so she wouldn't do it, She was like, no, I can't leave my kids. And she didn't know how to even begin to think of raising, the last 5 or 6 children that were still at home, especially the last 5. So she did not have any skills, parenting skills, coping skills. She was manic depressive. She was very sick physically. She was sick emotionally. She was just a very sick person. You know what I mean? And not only that, but very hateful and angry towards her children. Even though she would say she loved her boys especially. I love my boys, she would say. But she would never say she loved me. And as soon as I would tell her I loved her, she would just push me away. And then I'd say, why don't you say you love me back? And she'd say, I don't have to say I love you back. I don't have to tell you I love you. And I'd be like, yes, you do. I need to hear it. And she'd be like, I don't love you. That's the whole issue. You don't mean, you're nothing to me. That's what she would tell me. And but she loved her boys. So, she did kind of show some love there towards her boys. But not towards her girls for some reason. But she was horribly abused by her mother, and she tried to protect her siblings, and mainly all of the girls, her younger sisters. And one of her uncles was killed by my grandma. My grandma killed one of her brothers, and never went to jail. Nothing, they just buried him, no problem. My grandmother was a horrible woman, absolutely horrible. So my mom, there's the offspring of evil, you know what I mean? So there's my mom trying to be thinking this marriage is just going to be so great to get her out of her own home. She was living at home, and then she had the opportunity to get away from my abusive grandmother and married this guy who she thought life was going to be so good, who he snowed her big time, and then she gets in this marriage with him, and it turns out to be nothing but more abuse on top of more abuse. So she, it's no wonder she lost her mind, you know what I mean, and couldn't cope. I knew that what was happening in the home was not necessarily all her fault, even though, my sister will sometimes say stuff like she knew what she was doing. She didn't have to treat you like that. She didn't have to treat me like that. She knew what she was doing. It's not like we got to feel all that sorry for her. But still, see, I don't condone abuse of any kind, so I don't condone what she did. But the thing is I could see why, how she was so sick and so miserable that she couldn't help herself, She would just go into a rage, and she would just, whoever happened to be in the room would actually feel the wrath of her rage. It didn't, whether it was me or my brother or my dad or my sister, whoever was in the room, if you were in there and she was ready to let off and let go, you were going to get it. So it was a lot of times not something personal. You just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, she was just so messed up. So don't allow that to happen to yourself. That's what I made a decision. I said, I will not allow that to happen as an adult. And so, but then I created a very safe world for myself, putting up walls everywhere, and didn't really want to let anybody in. And then when I met, my sweetheart, who I'm with now, it was very, very hard to let those walls come down because I didn't trust him. I didn't trust anybody, really. You know what I mean? As far as I could throw him. So it's hard. We have to go back and relearn and redo this stuff, and be good to ourselves, right? And not allow ourselves to be, to be abused again, right? They go on to talk about social pathways. Social pathways link childhood abuse and its negative health outcomes through difficulties in establishing intimate relationships. And the association between dysfunctional relationships and adverse mental and physical health outcomes has been frequently reported. That's from Draper, 2007. Traumatic abuse in childhood can lead to chronic negative expectations and perceptions around safety, trust, esteem, intimacy, and control, which are readily activated by interpersonal interactions in the present environment. That's from Henderson, 2006. And it says, children exposed to environmental extremes and abusive situations and lacking an adult to provide continuity can have a problem understanding themselves or others. That's from Streak, Fisher, and Vanderkolk, 2000. Without a clear appreciation of who they are or others are, such children do not know how to enlist other people as allies. People are perceived as sources of terror or gratification, but rarely fellow human beings with their own sets of needs and desires. That's interesting. Streak, Fisher, and Vanderkolk. Unable to regulate their feelings, abused children are prone to scare other children, and in time adults, away, and hence lack reliable playmates. Parental child abuse not only traumatizes children, but also deprives them of healing interactions. And 2/3 of the long-term negative mental health effects of child abuse are related to poor education, work choices, and deficiencies in intimate relationships, with poor intimate relationships and career choices being among the most influential. This suggests that the social development pathway is significantly impacted by childhood abuse, causing negative emotional or psychological outcomes in adulthood, and concluded that developing strong social supports was an important factor in ameliorating the effects of depression in a group of adolescents who had experienced severe abuse. And that's just it. 2/3 of the long-term negative mental health effects of childhood abuse are related to poor education, work choices, and deficiencies in intimate relationships. And it's no wonder. You know what I mean? I don't understand how society can think that, if someone who's been horribly abused would not have any problems, and it just wouldn't affect them at all. I can't imagine. I know if people split and dissociate and fragment and don't even realize the abuse happened, quite often they can go on without having any side effects that they might know about, probably because they have split, and all of that stuff is not on the surface level. It's way, 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 way down somewhere, way off somewhere inside of them that they don't even know about. They don't even get in touch with it, right? But man, when you're cognitive and you're in it, and then you remember it, and these behaviors that we take on, well, we might not even recognize them. First of all, if they're just a learned behavior we just learned as children, we wouldn't even know what it was that we're doing. That's why it's good to see a counselor or therapist, right? Someone who can notice if we're doing any kind of self-sabotaging, which I was pointed out that I was self-sabotaging about a year ago. Let's see, maybe not even that long ago, about 7 months ago, because of this job that I had that I was working at, very temporary. I was a life coach actually got in touch with me. I sort of talked about that on one of my blog talk shows. But I was self-sabotaging because I was taking on my boss's stress. I couldn't even handle going in the next day because I thought she was going to be mad at me, which I knew she was, because she was just mad, period. This was a mad woman. She was just stressed right out, and I didn't want to work there. I was like, I don't want to work with somebody like that. And well, this life coach called me, because I didn't even call in. I just stayed home. So then she phoned, and she's like, so how's everything going? We noticed that you're not at work today, and we're just calling to see how you're doing. And I said, well, I'm really stressed out. I said, I'll tell you that. I said, my boss is really stressing me out. I'm taking on her stress. And I said, I'll tell you why. Because I was abused as a child, and I take on a lot of the stress that's around me. It's a behavioral issue, but I said I'm trying to learn to work through it. But the thing is that woman, I'd rather not even go back, because she's stressing me out to the point where I can't even go to work. And that lady was like, well, if you don't, you have a choice. You don't have to go back. But you also, as a surviving child abuse, which is unfortunate, you can learn how to stand up for yourself without, making it a serious, confrontation. You have every right to return back to work there. As a matter of fact, that boss, actually, I talked to her and she apologized for her behavior, and she said she's sorry and she does want you to come back. So the whole thing was avoided. But that lady sort of pointed out to me what I was doing, that it was, I was just kind of behaviorally self-sabotaging, right? It was just quit, run, right? Just run away. So thanks, everybody, for hanging in here. I got about a minute left. We'll be back on Monday morning, and I'll see if there's anything else on this website that's worth talking about. Otherwise, I might have some different information. It's a great website, www.asca.org.au. Have a great weekend. I'll be on tonight, 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio with Donna Shear, and then again my show after that. Take care of yourselves, everybody. Make sure you get some help. Don't sit and suffer in silence. Get a hold of me if you need something. Resources, references, any kind of information I have, I can get to you. Let me know, and I'm around on Facebook and whatnot, and also on Blog Talk Radio here. And just make sure you keep holding on to that hope. Never give up. Just keep reaching out. Keep looking for the hope where you can find it. And, you'll have better days. You'll have many more better days eventually, too, than bad days if you've experienced all this stuff. And, you just keep holding on for those better days. That's what I do. So take care, everybody, and have a great weekend if I don't hear from you. And we'll be talking to you real soon. Bye-bye.